Hey everybody, it's Brad here. Before we start today's episode, I just wanted to give a big thanks to all of you who have submitted story ideas. If you have a story to submit to us, now's a great time. Visit our website at crazygoodturns.org/celebrate to tell us about a person or organization who's done something great for someone else, and they could be featured in an upcoming episode. Finally, I wanted to let you know that I'll be taking a bit of time off from Crazy Good Turns to attend to some personal matters. I'm happy to say that Brian Sabin will be stepping in for a few episodes as guest host. Brian's been a key member of the Crazy Good Turns team for some time now, and I'm sure he's going to do a great job. As always, thanks for listening.
It's still the most frightening explosion I've ever seen in my life. You know, it's a 36,000-pound vehicle. It's 18 tons, and it got picked up like it was a Coke can and thrown 100 feet. When it landed, it didn't have a front engine. It was like sheared off, and it was missing one of its 1,000-pound tires. It had been thrown another 150, 200 feet from the vehicle.
That's the voice of Matt Zeller. In 2008, Matt was an Army lieutenant on his first tour in Afghanistan. 14 days into his tour, Matt's unit was ambushed.
And I ended up getting, through successive explosions, either running or being sort of knocked down to the ground and forward down the side of this hill to the point where I landed in an Afghan grave, a freshly dug grave. The next thing I realized was, I'm going to die here. I'm going to die today. I didn't know that when I woke up that morning, but I was convinced of it at 4:50 in the afternoon on April the 28th, 2008, 26 years old, and I was going to die on the side of this hill protecting this blown-up vehicle.
Matt and his men fought back, but were badly outnumbered. Somewhere between 40 and 50 Taliban fighters had surrounded the 15 men in Matt's unit. The situation seemed hopeless.
I just decided at that point I was going to go out fighting. So I picked up and I rotated my selector switch back from safe to semi to continue to engage my target. At that point, someone yelled, "Zeller, don't shoot to your six. There's friendlies to your rear." And I turned and saw over my shoulder that there were these 3 up-armored Humvees driving like bats out of hell, coming towards my position.
The Humvees brought more firepower. Reinforcements jumped out of the vehicles while the soldiers manning the Humvees' heavy machine guns took aim at a nearby ridge. That's where many of the Taliban had been hiding, but not all of them.
I'm going to freely admit something. At that point, I had lost my military bearing. What I should have done was I should have turned back to my field of fire and monitored my fighting position because I would have seen these 2 idiots coming for me. I made a mistake. And Janice, thank God, is my guardian angel.
Janice is Janice Shinwari. He was an Afghan translator hired by the U.S. to help coalition forces.
What he decides to do is he decides to basically throw his shoulder and check me back into the hole, like one would sort of knock someone down in football real hard or check a guy into the boards in hockey. He hits me real hard. I went flying back into the grave. I landed with a thud. It knocked the wind out of me, and at the same time, I hear the unmistakable sound of an AK-47 going off right next to me. The next thing I see is this Afghan man standing over me, and he's looking down at me, and I'm looking up at him, and he reaches out his hands to me, and I wasn't expecting that, and I just sort of said, "Who are you?" And he looks back at me, and he says, "I'm Janice. I'm one of your translators. You're not safe." And he pulls me up out of this hole, and that's when I looked past him, and I saw the bodies of the 2 guys that he had just shot and killed.
Janice had saved Matt's life, but before long, Matt would have the chance to return the favor. Today, there are thousands of combat translators like Janice who have fought alongside U.S. troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. Many, like Janice, are directly responsible for saving the lives of American soldiers. In this episode, you'll hear how Matt and Janice formed a brotherhood after that life-saving moment, and how they are now on a mission to save thousands of others. Today, the two are part of a nonprofit called No One Left Behind. The organization is dedicated to helping thousands of combat translators and their families escape danger. But the mission doesn't end there. No One Left Behind also helps these men and women build new lives in the U.S., finding them places to stay, jobs to work, and the other things they need. It's a story about trust, honor, and living up to your word. This is Crazy Good Turns. We tell inspiring stories about people who do amazing things for others. I'm your host, Brian Sabin. Matt had met Janice only once before Janice saved his life. It was a brief encounter, a quick introduction. They hadn't said much more than hello. So after the fight, Matt went looking for Janice to thank him.
The next morning at breakfast, I found him eating alone in our chow hall. And at that point, everything came pouring out. I realized at that moment that this guy was as responsible for my life as my parents were. That this was that the 28th of April was going to be at that point forever a second birthday. We call our alive day in the military. This guy was the reason why I was still sitting there, and I didn't even know his name.
Janis had grown up in Afghanistan. He was a young boy when the Soviets invaded during the 1980s. Many of his childhood memories involved conflict or tragedy.
I remembered after when I was 5, the Mujahideen, they put a bomb in a cinema. I was standing with my mom when I heard a really huge boom, and after that I saw really bad smoke coming out from the windows and from the door, and people were running. A lot of people I saw, people were running with no hands, and some people were carrying dead bodies and injured bodies. I couldn't sleep for a couple of nights, and I was caring every night.
When the Taliban took over Afghanistan in 1996, Janis and his family fled to Pakistan. They stayed away until after the U.S.-led invasion of 2001. By that time, Janis had learned to speak English. He worked as an English teacher in Kabul for a few years before he became a translator.
Everybody were tired of Al-Qaeda and Taliban in my country. And I wanted somehow to go support my government, support my people, and to fight against this virus from spreading to the whole world.
Combat translators are critical to U.S. operations in Afghanistan. Translators like Janis become trusted partners. Many were even issued guns, despite Army regulations forbidding it. But supporting the Americans comes at a steep personal price. Being identified as an Afghan combat translator is a sure way to get on the Taliban's kill list, which is why many cover their faces and try to remain anonymous. But not Janis.
Most of our friends, they covered their faces, but I didn't. One day, somebody asked me why I didn't cover my face. I said, I'm not scared. I don't fear of Taliban. I show them my face. I want them to fear of me. If they can do anything, tell them come face to face to me, fight to me.
Matt and Janis formed a tight bond during that very first conversation.
Janis told me, when I ultimately asked him, why did you do it, man? Why did you save my life? He looked at me and he said, you're a guest in my country. You came from the other side of the planet to make sure my family had a better life. I'm a complete stranger to you. I am honor-bound. It is my duty to make sure you go home alive to yours. I would take the bullet first, not you.
The two stayed close throughout the rest of Matt's time in Afghanistan. Janis served as the translator for Matt's unit. Matt credits him with gaining information from locals that saved the lives of other soldiers.
Other than being a father to my daughter and husband to my wife, the thing I'm most proud of in life is my officer evaluation report says that we went home without suffering any serious loss of life or limb. We didn't lose a single person, and we didn't lose even a pinky toe. And the only way I was able to do it was because of Janis, or his son, Janis's backup.
Matt's tour ended around the same time that officials back home were acknowledging just how much danger translators like Janis faced. In 2008, Congress passed a bill designed to help protect translators by providing special immigration visas, or SIVs, to Iraqis and Afghans who'd assisted U.S. troops. By then, hundreds of translators had been killed, something that Matt was keenly aware of when he was saying farewell to Janis.
When we said goodbye, I made him this offer. I said, look, there's this new visa program. It just got passed in Congress. It's going to allow the Iraqis to get visas. I think there's one for Afghans. It's coming up, or it maybe already here. Do you want me to sponsor you for this? And he said, no. He said, you're going to come back one day as a guest in my country, and we're going to go to Panjshir, because we always used to talk about how beautiful Panjshir and Jalalabad were. And he said, I'm going to show you the beauty of Afghanistan, and we're going to go and enjoy it and have a wonderful time. We're going to go hiking, and we're going to go swimming in the rivers and the lakes, and we're going to eat the food. It sounded awesome. And I wanted to believe it was going to be true. I really did, but I knew just kind of deep down in my heart that wasn't, I feared that wasn't ever going to be our fate.
Matt made it home safe. He tried to return to a normal life, and Janis was assigned to another unit. Not long after, Janis received bad news.
Matt left at the end of 2008. In early 2009, the ANA, Afghan National Army intelligence officer, he called me and he said, Janis, do you know the Taliban have your picture? Then he came to me and we had a cup of tea. And he said, Janice, you are in a very bad situation now. I was like, why? And he said, your name is added to the Taliban kill list. And now your picture is sent to all units. A couple of days later, I received a call from like completely stranger number. And somebody talks to me and he says, we know who are you and we know your house, we know your entire family.
Janice had never feared for his own safety, but by now he had a wife and 2 children. So he remembered Matt's promise.
So Janice contacts me a couple of weeks later. I've just gotten back home. And he says, brother, I've been placed on the Taliban's kill list. They're hunting me. We got all the paperwork together and we submitted it. At this point, he had gotten transferred from our outpost up to Kabul. It took us a long time to get all the paperwork collected because back then it was a lot. By January of 2011, we were ready to go. We submitted it thinking naively it would take maybe 6 months, maybe a year. Well, 2 years later, we're still waiting for the visa.
Janice continued working for the Army. To cut down on his chances of being killed or exposing his family, he decided to work and live on base, training other translators. It wasn't enough.
And a couple months later, I received a phone call. I thought it might be one of my translators called me because there was like 250 translators. I was like, who is this and what's your name? You say the name because they don't say their right names. Every time they tell you like a wrong name. And the guy finally told me, Janice, we thought you quit your job, but you didn't. You're still working with the American. There is no more warnings for you. Now we are coming to hunt you down. We are coming to kill you or a member of your family.
By this time, it was 2013, and things went from bad to worse. The Army was drawing down its forces. Janice soon received news that the base where he worked would be closed. Come fall, he'd have no more protection. Janice reached out to Matt again.
So he pings me to tell me, you've got till October to make good on this promise. I, at that point in my life, had ran for Congress and had a couple of friends in the media, and I knew a member of Congress or two who I thought I might be able to get in touch with. And I started calling in every favor I had, sort of attempting everything, hoping that something might stick.
Matt spread the word as far and as wide as he could. Finally, Janice got some help from an unexpected hero, the American people.
Matt told me, don't worry, brother, he will do something. And then I saw an online petition on the internet that everybody was signing for me. And after a couple of weeks, there was more than 100,000 signatures for me. And in that time, it's September 2013 that I receive a call from the U.S. Embassy in Afghanistan. I have to go drop off my passports to get my visa.
Days before Janice and his family were to board a plane to the U.S., they received news that their visas had been revoked. Someone had called the embassy to say that Janice was a threat to the U.S. This sort of tactic, saying that an ally is a threat, is common, as are delays in the special visa program. Despite the government's pledge to bring thousands of translators to the U.S., the pace has been far slower. It involves many hurdles and lots of red tape. For some, those delays can be deadly. Janice underwent 2 days of intense questioning by the CIA. We're talking 10 straight hours of being hooked to a polygraph machine for Janice to prove that he wasn't a threat.
From 1 to 11 for 11 hours, they asked me a lot of questions. And I looked at this lady and I said, look, this has been 1 month that I didn't eat anything. I can't sleep. And I'm with my in-laws. Please tell me if I pass this test because I'm in a really bad situation. She smiles at me and she says, Janice, I can't say anything. I was like, please tell me this, that if you make this decision, what will we do? And she said, if I'm a decision maker, you are a good guy. Next morning, I checked my visa status that my visas were issued. 10 minutes later, I received a call from the embassy. And it says, Janice, congratulations, your visa is good. Now, you need to leave Afghanistan as soon as you can.
The next morning, Janice, his wife, and his children boarded a flight bound for the U.S. All told, Janice had spent 9 years of his life helping U.S. forces fight the Taliban. A typical tour of duty for a soldier is 1 year. When the Shinwari family touched down on American soil, Zeller was waiting for them.
I found him a 2-bedroom apartment for him and his wife and his 2 kids, 4-year-old son and 2-year-old daughter at the time. Just the sheer generosity of my friends and family, we were able to furnish his home within 2 days, top to bottom, of just about everything that they needed.
For Janice and his family, the sense of relief was immediate.
When I got to the United States, that was my first time in my entire life and first night that I slept without any fear.
Soon after they arrived, Janice again received an unexpected helping hand from the American people.
One of the things that had transpired during the interview with CBS was the correspondent asked when I learned at the airport that it was incumbent upon me to help him throughout his transition to his new life in America. She said, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to start a GoFundMe page tonight and see if we can't raise him any money. And she said, well, we'll put that on the online portion of our broadcast. We can't say it online, but we'll definitely put a link on the website. And they did. And so on the way back from Target, with some cookware and linens and towels and stuff for him, I decided to stop at the bank to see how much money we had raised. And I was shocked to find that there was $35,000 in the account from complete strangers.
Matt rushed home to tell his friend the good news. The date was October 31st, 2013, Janice's first Halloween in the U.S.
And so I get to his house, and there's a line of children out the door, all in Halloween costume. And as I'm walking up, I realize I have failed my brother. I am not a good friend. I have completely forgotten to tell the man who saved my life what Halloween is and what one is supposed to do on Halloween. And so as I'm walking into his apartment building, there's a staircase that led up to his apartment. The line of children goes right to his door, and there's Janice at the top with the wad of $1 bills that he had about $500 in cash, most of it in $1. And per child, he was giving out about $3 to each kid. And he looks at me and he said, brother, you never told me that there are so many beggars in America. But why are they dressed in such funny clothing and only asking for candy? And so I got him inside and I sat him down. I said, look, don't worry about the money issues. And I pulled out this check for $35,000. And I said, brother, this here is a gift from the American people. It's in thanks in exchange for your 9 years of frontline combat service. It's not nearly enough to cover our nation's debt to your service, but it's enough to at least pay for your year's worth of rent and food. So I want you to do something for me. I want you to promise me you're going to put your feet up. You're going to play with your kids. You're not going to worry about money or taking a job. And you're just going to decompress because you, quite frankly, have earned this.
Janice appreciated the gesture, but he wouldn't take the money.
He looked back at me and said, I can't take the money. Then he got really serious and he looked me right in the eye and he said, well, what about his son and Maiwand and Latif and Jamshid and Habib? I said, what about them? He's naming all the other translators who were still back on our base at that point. And he said, well, don't they deserve to be here too? And he had a really good point. They did. So I said, brother, what would you have me do with this money? He looked at me in those gentle eyes of his and he said, do you think maybe we could use it to start an organization to help them like the way you've helped me, to help them get their visas, and when they get here, maybe we could find them a place to live and pay for their rent for a couple of months and furnish their home through gifts of friends and family and help them get started with their new life. And that's been the mission of No One Left Behind ever since.
The two took the money from that GoFundMe campaign and used it to launch No One Left Behind. The organization is dedicated to helping translators and others who've assisted the U.S. to get out of harm's way. First, they help them get visas and arrive in the U.S., something the organization calls Operation Lost in Translation.
The other part of Operation Lost in Translation is we actually try to pair them up and reunite them with the Americans with whom they served. So the same reunion that Janice and I were able to have, we try to give other folks that same reunion. Because I'll tell you, I have post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury, and I've been through the full complement of the VA's healthcare. And while it's excellent, the most healing thing that I've ever been through is bringing my brother home. We applaud them and thank them for their service and cheer for them and present them with an American flag and say, and I make a point of, we say to them, this is your flag now. You've earned this. This is your new home now. This is your new country and you're welcome here and we love you and we thank you for your service.
From there, No One Left Behind helps translators and their families find a place to live and covers their rent for the first 3 months. They also assist with job placement and pair them with a first friend, someone who they can rely on for help.
This is a lifetime partnership, honestly. Janice and I try to get together every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every Nowruz, every Eid, after Ramadan. We try to spend as much time together on the holidays because it's important for our families, but that's the bond that we're also trying to recreate with others because that's what we found is absolutely necessary to their survival.
The rest of the organization's time and effort goes towards advocacy. Matt says that translators deserve to be recognized as veterans, just like any other soldier.
We realize that going forward, the next sort of level of care that you guys need is they're often all coming home with the signature injuries of the war, post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury. But because of where they placed in the birth lottery, they're not allowed to access the VA. The only difference between Janice and I that anyone seems to care about is where we each had the dumb luck of being born. I won the birth lottery, so I ended up in America. He lost it. He ended up in Afghanistan literally the year before the Soviets invaded. Beautiful country, wonderful people, terrible time to be an Afghan. And yet, for whatever reason, the fact that he did 8 more years of service than I did seems to count for nothing. The thing that the only one that ever seems to care about is where we were both born. But I'm going to tell you right now, he is just as if not more deserving of access to the VA as I am and all of the benefits and rights and privileges that come with being a veteran.
For Matt, it's about more than just doing what's right. It's about trust. He points out that when a translator or anyone else who's helped the U.S. war efforts in Iraq or Afghanistan gets captured, they are executed, and it becomes propaganda for forces like the Taliban or ISIS. They use it as a recruiting tool.
And the only way we're ever going to counter that is, quite frankly, is if we have every single one of them we can get our hands on over here as an insurance policy that says, no, the Americans actually do live their values and keep their word.
Matt and Janice are working to make that the story for future generations of soldiers and the translators they rely upon. Their efforts show that, despite the government's shortcomings, the American people want to help. Janice says that he and his family feel welcomed in their new country, and perhaps for the first time, safe.
Now this is our home, and we love it. My children love it. My children can go to school. My wife, she can work. She goes to work. Now she speaks English. She drives here. In our country, I couldn't let my children to go to school because somebody would kill them or kidnap them. Now in here, we are free.
Thank you for listening to this episode of our podcast. Go to crazygoodturns.org to learn more about or donate to No One Left Behind. You can also submit your ideas for people or organizations we should feature on an upcoming episode. Stay connected with us between episodes by following us on Facebook or Twitter. Our show is audio engineered by Stephen Key. Music supervision and mixing by Score in Los Angeles. A special thanks to Megan Basinger. I'm your host, Brian Sabin.
Because I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now unless my brother saved my life. And the only reason he did is at some point he believed the Americans were honorable people and they'd keep their word. And I fear for my brothers and sisters who go off to fight in future wars because I want them to have as much luck as I did to come home. And the only way that I can guarantee that is to ensure that our narrative around the world is that if you work with us, we keep our word because Americans can be trusted.